Hello, I'm David Molloy, and this is the first video for our workshop series together. We're calling this workshop Crafting Story for Screen, and it is basically a run-through of effective tips for you to tell your stories effectively and entertainingly for screen. Essentially, I didn't want to get into too much technical camera and editing business. I wanted to give you guys the basics, the core basics of story construction, because I think that's going to give you a really strong basis on which you can build. And it's going to mean that you can tell stories well no matter the technology you're using. So basically, if you have a smartphone, which is what I'm filming on right now, then you can make a cinematic masterpiece. And don't think that I say that sort of, condescendingly either, because there literally are award-winning festival circuit films that have been done entirely on a smartphone. So it's absolutely possible, and the trick is to know the core tenets of storytelling. So I'm coming to you from the very scenic Sofala. It is the oldest surviving gold mining town in regional New South Wales. I'm on the road at the moment, hence the slightly unusual format for the video. What I wanted to go through with you guys first is the basics of storyboarding, because this is essentially the layout for your film. I think with the kind of films that we'll be making and the kind of speedy process that we're doing, using a script is not really the most effective process, because a script is the kind of thing that you sit down with for a long time and you craft dialogue and you craft action and all of that sort of stuff. But when you're working in short form narrative, and particularly when you're new to it, a script is not necessarily the most useful thing, because you get bogged down in the words that you're saying. When you are storyboarding, essentially you are laying out your film on paper. You're practically editing it at that stage. So you should be able to look at your storyboard. You should be able to look at any storyboard and visualize the film in your head immediately. It is a way of putting that film onto paper before you've rolled a single take. I found in my experience as a filmmaker that the 3 core shots for telling your story are the wide, the mid, and the close. These are basically all you need to effectively communicate the story that you're trying to tell. They're the only things that you really need to think about composing and putting together, because they give all of the elements that you need to understand what is going on, the clear visual language that you need to tell a story. Now, the key to a good storyboard is clarity. Remember that the storyboard is something that you, as the person making the film, are the only one who is going to see it. So all it is that it is about clarity. If you're working with other people, it's about communicating, what it is that you are trying to accomplish in your film effectively. Don't get caught up in how perfect each of your individual drawings is, because it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you look at that picture, you go, oh, I know exactly how to frame this, and you can then just go and do that effectively. So the wide is all about context. It's about establishing the where, the when, and the who. So we get a sense of who is in this setting, the protagonist, if you will, or the other characters that we have in the film. We get a sense of what the setting is, cafe setting overlooking a creek. We get a sense of scale, and we get a sense of time as well, because the nature of any establishing shot is there's always going to be indicators like costume and various different things in the environment that will give a sense of when this thing is happening. So if you're going for a period piece, there's going to be more obvious indicators. If we were wanting to set up, Sofala back in the day, then we would be framing more historical objects as if they appeared, contemporary. The mid is all about relationships. So that can be between any 2 characters or multiple characters, or it can be the relationship of people to the environment, or the relationship of people to objects. It's all about establishing relationships. Typically, a mid is what you would shoot in if you had 2 people having a conversation. You cut back and forward between their 2 faces, and you would establish the distance between them. You would establish their body language towards each other, the way that they are communicating, and that establishes their relationship. So mid is all about relationships. The close-up is where you get to have a lot of fun as a filmmaker, because this is where you kind of distinguish yourself. Pretty much every filmmaker will be using wides and mids to tell their story, establishing their landscape, their context, and establishing their relationships. But every filmmaker differentiates in where they choose to use close-ups. Those close-ups can be obvious things, like the eyes of a character. It could be an extreme close-up on the eyes, or you could be focusing on details like the jewelry that they're wearing, or some important object in the environment. This could be a bee entering a flower, or anything really. Like the beauty with a close-up is that you get to dictate what those details are. You are choosing where to draw your audience's attention. So have fun with it, be creative, choose an unexpected close-up and see what that does to communicate new ideas in your story. And that's it for storyboarding. That's basically all you need to clearly and effectively tell a story on paper. And there's all sorts of variations on those shots. You can have extreme versions of any of them, an extreme wide that shows a really broad landscape. You can have an extreme close-up showing just the details of the human eye or anything else. It's kind of difficult to have an extreme mid, but I'm sure you can do it. The other little note for each of those when you are shooting a human figure is that in a wide you can see the whole figure, so you can see from the top of their head to their feet, and normally more than that, you're seeing the rest of the environment, but anything that shows the whole figure is considered wide. A mid is kind of this, basically anything from the waist up, and try and get the whole figure in there so that you're not sort of cutting off the top of the head like I am a little bit here. And a close-up is then kind of above the shoulders, your neck and face. The next thing I wanted to cover, which I think is going to be the main task for you over this next week until we have our first workshop together, is pitching. Because by the time that we are into our Zoom workshop, I want to have an opportunity to engage with the kind of stories that you want to tell. So really, this is your opportunity to kind of sell me on those stories. So pitching is basically the main way that screenwriters and producers and directors get their work made. It is a streamlined way of telling your story in a single sentence. But pitching is all just about selling your story. It's all just about getting people excited on it. You have interesting, compelling stories to tell, and I want you to be able to communicate those in an interesting and compelling way. So the very simple way that we do that, in the industry anyway, is to say a blank blank must blank in order to blank. So we are establishing here our protagonist, what they have to do across the course of the story, the stakes involved, and then what their reward is at the end. And that could be a tangible reward, like they end up in a relationship with someone, or it could be more like a mission objective or something along those lines. To give you an example, an adventurous archaeologist must find and reclaim the Ark of the Covenant in order to prevent it falling into the hands of the Nazis. So that is the pitch for Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is the first Indiana Jones film, a Steven Spielberg classic. What we've set up there is our protagonist, the adventurous archaeologist. So we've got a sense of their expertise, what their job is, and a sense of their character. They're adventurous. So we kind of can start to picture this person in our heads, and hopefully the picture that we get in our minds is kind of close to what Harrison Ford would end up looking like in that movie, with the akubra, the sort of practical clothing, and the general way of carrying himself. We've also established the mission, which is an adventure to find the Ark of the Covenant. So we're setting up, we would call this in the industry a MacGuffin, but basically like an object that people are seeking and fighting over, and something that is very, very important. So in Raiders of the Lost Ark, that is the Ark of the Covenant. That is the main goal of the protagonist, is to find this thing and get their hands on it. Why? Because they have to make sure the Nazis don't get to it first. Indy's an archaeologist. He wants to make sure that he can get this, ancient, sacred, important object and put it in a museum where it belongs, so that it can be safeguarded. Whereas his antagonists, the Nazis, are trying to get it so they can secure it to use to enhance their power. And I shouldn't have to tell you that Nazis having anything that can enhance their power is a real bad thing. So we've established the stakes there. It's a story that has very, very high stakes. So if Indiana Jones doesn't achieve his goals, then big, big consequences follow. So when you're pitching your story, you should have an adjective for your protagonist, a word that describes how they are, as well as perhaps a job or an important characteristic, so an adventurous archaeologist. You should have their goal, their objective, their major mission, and what the rewards or consequences of achieving or failing that mission are. It's very simple. And this could be for any kind of narrative. It can be as mundane as you like. A small bird must learn to fly in order to leave the nest. Like, it can be very, very simple. This can describe really any story. So I want you to find a way to apply this structure to the story that you want to tell. And along with that, I want you to think of a story that you already know and like, and pitch it the way that I just pitched Raiders of the Lost Ark. So find a story that speaks to you and find the way that it would have been pitched in the first place, the sentences they would have used to sell this idea to a producer. If you get as far as starting on storyboards for your story idea, that would be brilliant, because it's then going to give us a lot that we can, play around with and look into when we're in our first Zoom workshop. But even if you don't get a chance to fully storyboard your whole film, that is totally fine. Just start chucking down a couple of drawings and see how far you get, because then we can start to talk about your techniques. And that's it from me for this video. So I will see you next week in our first Zoom in a more mundane setting than lovely regional New South Wales. I'll just be in my house, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the kind of stories that you guys want to tell and the ways that we can make them as exciting as possible across the course of our time together. So thanks, talk to you soon.